What if the only person who could save you was someone you had dismissed as too old? This is what happened to Vincent Drake, and it taught him that experience and wisdom are worth more than youth and technology. Before we get to this wonderful story, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now let's get back to the story. Vincent Drake stood in his glass-walled office on the 52nd floor of Drake Enterprises, surveying his domain like a young emperor. At 39, he was the youngest CEO in his industry, having built a $2.8 billion tech conglomerate by embracing what he called the future mindset, constantly updating, constantly upgrading, constantly replacing the old with the new. Vincent's philosophy was simple. In the fast-moving world of technology and business, experience was just another word for outdated. He preferred hiring recent college graduates with the latest training over seasoned professionals with decades of experience. Older employees, in his view, were dinosaurs clinging to obsolete methods and slowing down progress. That Tuesday morning in March, Vincent was preparing for what he considered a long-overdue conversation with Grace Thompson, his head of security. Grace had been with the company for 15 years and had 30 years of experience in law enforcement and corporate security before that. At 58, she was by far the oldest member of his executive team, and Vincent had been looking for an excuse to replace her with someone younger and more innovative. "Sir?" Grace's voice came through his intercom. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes, Grace. Come in." Grace Thompson entered Vincent's office with the confident stride of someone who had spent decades in security work. She was a tall, dignified woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a professional bun, wearing a crisp navy blazer and carrying herself with the alert bearing of someone always scanning for potential threats. "Good morning, Vincent," Grace said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Is this about the quarterly security review?" "Actually, Grace, it's about your future with the company." Grace's expression didn't change, but Vincent noticed her posture straightened slightly. After 30 years in law enforcement, she'd developed excellent instincts for reading situations. "I see. What about my future?" Vincent had rehearsed this conversation, but looking at Grace's steady gaze made him feel oddly uncomfortable. "Grace, you've been a valuable member of this team, but I think it's time for Drake Enterprises to move in a new direction with our security operations." "What kind of new direction?" "We need fresh thinking, innovative approaches, someone who understands modern technology and contemporary security threats. The business world is changing rapidly, and our security needs to evolve with it." Grace leaned back in her chair. "Vincent, are you firing me?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. "I'm suggesting that it might be time for you to consider retirement. You've had a good run, but I'm too old." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Grace's voice remained calm and professional. "Vincent, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "What exactly do you think is wrong with our current security operations?" Vincent had been dreading this question because the honest answer was nothing. Under Grace's leadership, Drake Enterprises had never experienced a single security breach, theft, or safety incident. Her systems were comprehensive, her staff was well-trained, and her protocols were thorough and effective. "It's not about what's wrong," Vincent said, falling back on corporate speak. "It's about positioning ourselves for future challenges." "I see. And you believe that my 30 years of experience in law enforcement, 15 years with this company, and my ongoing professional development in cybersecurity and threat assessment make me unqualified to handle future challenges." Vincent felt his irritation rising. This was exactly the kind of pushback he expected from older employees who couldn't accept that their time had passed. "Grace, this isn't personal. It's a business decision. We need someone with a more contemporary perspective, someone who grew up with digital technology, someone who understands how young criminals think. Someone younger. Someone more aligned with our company culture." Grace nodded slowly. "I understand. When would you like me to transition out?" Vincent was surprised by how easily she was accepting this. "We'll provide a generous severance package, of course, and I'd appreciate it if you could spend the next 2 weeks training your replacement." "Who is my replacement?" "Derek Chen. He's 28 has a master's degree in cybersecurity from MIT and has been working for a cutting-edge security consulting firm in Silicon Valley. Grace was quiet for a moment. Vincent, may I offer you some advice? Sure. Derek Chen is very bright, and I'm sure he has excellent technical skills. But security isn't just about technology. It's about understanding human nature, reading situations, anticipating problems before they occur, and making split-second decisions under pressure. Those skills come from experience, not from textbooks. Vincent felt his patience wearing thin. Grace, I appreciate your concern, but I'm confident in my decision. Grace stood up. Of course, I'll begin the transition process immediately. After Grace left, Vincent felt a sense of relief. Finally, he could bring Drake Enterprises' security operations into the 21st century. Derek Chen would implement state-of-the-art digital monitoring systems, artificial intelligence threat detection, and automated response protocols. It would be faster, more efficient, and more cost-effective than Grace's old-fashioned approach. Vincent had no way of knowing that in exactly 3 months, Grace Thompson's experience would be the only thing standing between him and death. Derek Chen arrived at Drake Enterprises with enthusiasm, ambition, and a laptop full of revolutionary ideas for modernizing the company's security operations. He was everything Vincent had hoped for: young, energetic, tech-savvy, and eager to prove himself. Derek's first presentation to the executive team was impressive. He outlined plans for facial recognition systems, predictive analytics for threat assessment, drone surveillance for the corporate campus, and an AI-powered monitoring system that could track and analyze thousands of data points simultaneously. The old model of security relied too heavily on human judgment, Derek explained, clicking through his PowerPoint presentation. Human beings are inconsistent, emotional, and prone to error. Technology is objective, reliable, and operates 24/7 without getting tired or distracted. Vincent was pleased with Derek's approach. This was exactly the kind of forward-thinking leadership he wanted in his company. But over the following weeks, some problems began to emerge. Derek's high-tech systems generated so many alerts that the security staff couldn't keep up with them. The facial recognition software had a 15% false positive rate, meaning it regularly identified threats that didn't exist. The AI monitoring system was excellent at detecting digital intrusions, but struggled with physical security issues that required human intuition. More concerning was Derek's management style. He dismissed the input of older security staff members, preferring to rely on data analytics rather than their street-level experience. Several veteran security guards requested transfers to other departments, complaining that Derek didn't value their knowledge or listen to their concerns. Grace Thompson, meanwhile, had quietly transitioned out of the company. She'd taken a part-time consulting position with a smaller firm, but Vincent heard through the grapevine that she was basically semi-retired, spending time with her grandchildren and volunteering at a local community center. Vincent felt vindicated by his decision. The company was moving forward, embracing innovation, and positioning itself for the future. If a few old-timers couldn't adapt to change, that was their problem. He had no idea that Grace Thompson was still watching Drake Enterprises from afar, and that her experienced eyes were noticing security vulnerabilities that Derek's sophisticated systems were missing entirely. 3 months after Grace's departure, Vincent was working late on a Thursday evening, preparing for a crucial acquisition meeting the following day. Drake Enterprises was in the final stages of purchasing a smaller tech company, a deal that would add $500 million to their portfolio and cement Vincent's reputation as a visionary leader. The building was nearly empty except for Vincent, a few other executives, and the overnight security staff. Derek had assured Vincent that his new security protocols provided better protection than ever before, with multiple layers of digital monitoring and automated threat detection. Vincent was reviewing financial projections when his office lights suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. "That's odd," Vincent muttered, reaching for his phone to call building maintenance. Before he could dial, his office door opened, and 3 figures in dark clothing and ski masks entered. One of them was carrying what looked like a stun gun, another had zip ties, and the third held a small electronic device that Vincent didn't recognize. "Mr. Drake," the lead figure said in a calm, professional voice, "please don't make any sudden movements. We're not here to hurt you, but we will if you resist." Vincent's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. Derek had assured him that the building's security was impenetrable. How had these people gotten past all the cameras, sensors, and monitoring systems? "What do you want?" Vincent asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "We want you to come with us, quietly and cooperatively. You can't just kidnap me from my own building. There are security guards, cameras, alarms." The lead kidnapper held up the electronic device. "Your new security system is very impressive, Mr. Drake. Very high-tech, very complicated. Also very easy to hack if you know what you're doing." Vincent felt a chill run down his spine. "The guards will notice I'm missing. The guards are watching monitors that are showing them exactly what we want them to see. As far as they know, you're still in your office working late." One of the other kidnappers moved behind Vincent's desk and placed the zip ties around his wrists with practiced efficiency. Vincent realized these weren't amateur criminals. They were professionals who had clearly studied his company's security systems and found ways to exploit them. "This is impossible," Vincent said as they led him toward the door. "Derek said the new systems were foolproof." "Mr. Chen is very bright," the lead kidnapper replied, "but he made the same mistake you did. He assumed that newer technology is always better technology. Sometimes the old ways are harder to bypass because they rely on human judgment rather than computer programs." As they escorted Vincent through the building's corridors, he saw that the kidnappers had indeed defeated every security measure Derek had installed. They moved through blind spots in the camera coverage, avoided motion sensors that had been reprogrammed to ignore certain areas, and used electronic jammers to disrupt the AI monitoring systems. But most disturbing of all, Vincent realized that this kidnapping was only possible because of the changes he had made to the security department. Grace Thompson would never have allowed so many single points of failure in the system. Her approach had been redundant, overlapping, and relied heavily on human observation and intuition, exactly the qualities that would have detected and prevented this kind of sophisticated attack. As the kidnappers led him to a service elevator that would take them to the parking garage, Vincent had a terrible realization. The only person who might be able to find him was the woman he had fired for being too old. Grace Thompson was at home watching the evening news when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Derek Chen's number, which surprised her. She and Derek had maintained a cordial but distant relationship during the transition period, and they hadn't spoken since her last day at the company. "Grace, thank God you answered." Derek's voice was tight with panic. "I need your help." "What's wrong, Derek?" "Vincent's been kidnapped." Grace felt her blood run cold. "What happened?" "I don't know exactly. He was working late, and when I checked the security feeds this morning, he was gone. But the cameras show him in his office all night. It doesn't make sense." Grace was already reaching for her coat. "Derek, call the FBI immediately. Then meet me at the office. Don't touch anything. Don't review any more footage, and don't let anyone else into Vincent's office." "Grace, Derek, 30 years of experience is telling me that every minute we waste increases the danger Vincent is in. Do exactly what I said, and do it now." Grace drove to Drake Enterprises with her mind racing through possibilities. Professional kidnapping of a high-profile CEO suggested organized crime, corporate espionage, or international terrorism. Each scenario had different implications for Vincent's safety and different strategies for his recovery. When she arrived at the building, she found Derek in the security control room, surrounded by monitors and looking completely overwhelmed. "Show me everything," Grace said without preamble. For the next hour, Derek walked Grace through the timeline of the previous evening. The security footage showed Vincent working in his office, but Grace's experienced eye immediately spotted the problems. "This footage has been looped," she said, pointing to subtle repetitive patterns in Vincent's movements. "See how he picks up that pen at exactly the same angle 3 times? And watch the timestamp. There's a microsecond gap every 12 minutes. Derek stared at the screen. "How did you see that?" The system didn't flag any anomalies. "Because the system looks for digital signatures of tampering. These kidnappers used analog methods. They physically intercepted the camera feeds and inserted pre-recorded footage. It's an old technique that your AI monitoring wouldn't recognize." Grace continued her analysis, and with each discovery, Derek looked more devastated. The kidnappers had exploited a dozen vulnerabilities in his security system, not because the technology was bad, but because he had relied too heavily on automation and not enough on human oversight. "Grace," Derek said quietly, "I'm sorry. You were right about needing experience and human judgment. I thought I could replace intuition with algorithms." "Derek, we can discuss that later. Right now, we need to focus on finding Vincent." Grace pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my contacts at the FBI. You need to prepare a complete analysis of every system failure." "Why?" "The FBI will have their own investigators." Grace looked at Derek with the patient expression of a teacher explaining something to a student. "Because, Derek, this kidnapping was specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses in your systems. That means the kidnappers studied our security protocols in detail. They know how we think, how our technology works, and what our blind spots are." So the only way to find Vincent is to think like someone with 30 years of experience in both security and criminal behavior. The FBI will handle the official investigation, but they're going to need someone who understands exactly how these kidnappers got in and, more importantly, why they chose to target Vincent now. Over the next 6 hours, Grace worked with federal agents to piece together the kidnapping timeline. Her analysis revealed a sophisticated operation that had been planned for months, specifically taking advantage of the security changes Vincent had implemented. "The kidnappers knew about Derek's appointment before it was announced," Grace explained to FBI Special Agent Martinez. "They waited until I was gone, and the new systems were fully operational before making their move." "How can you be sure?" Agent Martinez asked. Grace pulled out a timeline she had constructed. "Look at these incidents over the past 3 months. A food delivery driver who got lost and spent 20 minutes wandering the building. A cleaning crew that worked on the 50th floor instead of their assigned 48th floor. A tech repair specialist who showed up to fix equipment that wasn't broken." "You think these were reconnaissance missions?" "I know they were. Each incident probed a different aspect of Derek's security systems. The delivery driver tested response times and guard patrol patterns. The cleaning crew mapped camera blind spots. The repair specialist gained access to the building's technical infrastructure." Derek, who had been quietly listening, looked sick. "I reviewed all those incidents. The digital log showed everything was normal." "Because you were looking at the wrong data," Grace said gently. "You focused on digital signatures and automated alerts. I would have focused on human behavior and pattern recognition." Agent Martinez studied Grace's analysis. "Ms. Thompson, this is excellent work. Do you have any theories about who's behind this?" Grace nodded. "Based on the sophistication of the operation and the specific vulnerabilities they exploited, I believe we're dealing with a corporate espionage group. They're not after ransom money. They want information about Vincent's acquisition deals." "What makes you think that?" "The timing. Vincent was kidnapped the night before finalizing a major acquisition. The kidnappers went to enormous trouble to take him alive and undetected. If they wanted money, there are easier targets. If they wanted to kill him, they could have done that in his office." Grace turned to a map of the city she had spread across the conference table. "They need Vincent conscious and cooperative to access his financial accounts and business contacts. That means they're holding him somewhere secure, but not too remote, close enough to the city for digital communication, but isolated enough to avoid detection." Derek looked at the map. "How do we narrow down the location?" Grace smiled grimly. "We use the same thing that caught them in the first place: human experience and pattern recognition. Vincent had been held in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse for nearly 18 hours. His kidnappers had been professional, but not cruel. They had provided food, water, and even a blanket. But they had also made it clear that his cooperation was not optional. The leader of the group, who Vincent had started thinking of as the professional, had explained their demands with business-like clarity. "Mr. Drake, we need access to your acquisition files, your financial accounts, and your contacts in the international business community. You're going to provide that access voluntarily, or we're going to take it by force." "If you kill me, you get nothing," Vincent had replied. "We're not going to kill you, Mr. Drake. We're going to hurt you enough that you'll wish we had. Then we're going to hurt people you care about until you cooperate." The threat had been delivered in the same calm, professional tone the professional used for everything else. which made it even more terrifying. Vincent had spent the night trying to figure out how his kidnappers had penetrated Drake Enterprises' security so easily. Derek's systems were supposed to be state-of-the-art, incorporating the latest advances in artificial intelligence and automated threat detection. But as Vincent reflected on the kidnapping, he began to understand what had gone wrong. Derek's systems were sophisticated, but they were also predictable. They relied on algorithms and patterns that could be studied, analyzed, and ultimately defeated by someone with enough patience and technical skill. Grace Thompson's old-fashioned approach would have been much harder to penetrate. Her systems relied on human judgment, irregular patrol patterns, random security checks, and the kind of institutional knowledge that couldn't be downloaded from a computer. "You're thinking about your old security chief, aren't you?" the professional said, entering the room where Vincent was being held. Vincent looked up in surprise. "How did you—" Because anyone with sense would be thinking about Grace Thompson right now. She was the one variable we couldn't control. "Then why didn't you wait until she retired naturally?" The professional sat down across from Vincent. "Because we couldn't afford to wait. Your acquisition timeline forced our hand. We needed you during this specific window of opportunity. So you manipulated me into firing her." "We didn't have to manipulate you, Mr. Drake. We just had to wait. Your prejudices against older workers were well documented. All we had to do was provide you with a young, impressive alternative and let your biases do the rest." Vincent felt sick as he realized the implication. "Derek Chen works for you." Derek Chen is a bright young man who believes he's implementing cutting-edge security solutions. He has no idea that his systems were designed to have specific vulnerabilities that we could exploit. The professional leaned forward. "Mr. Drake, you fired the one person who could have prevented this kidnapping because you thought experience was worthless. Now that same experience is the only thing that might save your life." "What do you mean?" "Grace Thompson knows how we think. She understands our methods. And unlike your young security expert, she has the investigative skills to track us down." Vincent felt a glimmer of hope. "You think Grace is looking for me?" The professional smiled coldly. "I'm counting on it." Grace had been working without sleep for 36 hours, but her decades of experience in law enforcement had taught her how to function on adrenaline and determination. She had narrowed down the possible locations where Vincent was being held to a 6-square-mile area of industrial warehouses and abandoned buildings. "The kidnappers need 3 things," she explained to the FBI team. "Digital communication capabilities for accessing Vincent's accounts, physical security for holding him safely, and quick escape routes in case we get too close." Agent Martinez studied the map. "That still covers a lot of ground." "Yes, but I think I know how to narrow it down further." Grace pulled out her phone and called Derek. "Derek, I need you to do something that might sound strange. I want you to set up a fake digital trace that makes it look like we've identified the wrong location." "I don't understand." "I want you to create false evidence that we think Vincent is being held in the warehouse district near the airport. Make it look convincing, but don't be too subtle about it. I want the kidnappers to detect our fake investigation." Agent Martinez looked puzzled. "Why would we want them to know we're looking in the wrong place?" Grace smiled. "Because if they think we're focused on the airport area, they'll relax their security protocols everywhere else. And relaxed criminals make mistakes." Within 2 hours, Derek had created a convincing digital trail showing FBI interest in the airport warehouse district. Grace made sure that the false evidence would be discovered by anyone monitoring law enforcement communications. Then, she waited. At 3:47 a.m., Grace's phone buzzed with a text message from an untraceable number. "Stop looking or he dies." Grace immediately called Agent Martinez. "They took the bait. That threat means they detected our fake investigation and they're worried." "How does that help us?" "Because they just confirmed that Vincent is alive and that they're monitoring our communications. More importantly, they just told us they're not in the airport area." Grace was already putting on her coat. If they were holding Vincent near the airport, they wouldn't care if we searched there. The fact that they're trying to scare us away means we're close to something. Close to what? To the real location. The text came 30 minutes after Derek planted the fake evidence. That's enough time for someone to detect our false trail, analyze it, and realize we were getting too close to their actual position. Agent Martinez grabbed his gear. Where are we going? Grace pointed to a cluster of buildings on the map. The only area that would make them nervous about our fake airport investigation is the industrial zone directly opposite, the Riverside Warehouse District. It's close enough that they'd worry about us expanding our search, but far enough away that they felt safe. That's still a dozen buildings. Grace was already heading for the door. Then we'd better get started. The Riverside Warehouse District at 4 a.m. was a maze of shadows, abandoned buildings, and shipping containers. Grace led the FBI team through the area with the methodical efficiency of someone who had conducted dozens of similar searches during her law enforcement career. Derek's high-tech monitoring is useless here, she whispered to Agent Martinez as they approached the first building. These warehouses have too much steel and concrete for digital surveillance to penetrate. We're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. Grace's experience showed in every aspect of the search. She knew how to move silently through industrial terrain, how to read signs of recent human activity, and how to identify which buildings were truly abandoned versus which ones were being used for illicit purposes. At the fourth warehouse, Grace found what she was looking for. Fresh tire tracks, she pointed out to Agent Martinez. Multiple vehicles, recent enough that the tread patterns are still clear in the mud. She knelt down and examined the ground more closely. 3 different vehicles, one large enough to transport Vincent, 2 smaller ones for the kidnappers. And look at this, oil stains that are only a few hours old. Grace's phone buzzed with another threatening text. Final warning. She showed the message to Agent Martinez. They're getting desperate. That means we're close. Grace studied the warehouse building. It was 5 stories tall, with loading docks on the ground level and office spaces on the upper floors. Most importantly, it had multiple exit routes and clear sightlines in all directions, exactly what professional kidnappers would want. This is it, Grace said with certainty. Agent Martinez called for backup while Grace continued her reconnaissance. Her 30 years of experience had taught her to gather as much intelligence as possible before making a move. 3 entrances, 4 exit routes, internal stairwells that would allow the kidnappers to move Vincent between floors if necessary. Grace briefed the team. The hostage is most likely being held on the 3rd or 4th floor, high enough to prevent escape attempts but low enough for quick evacuation. How can you be sure? One of the younger agents asked. Because that's what I would do, Grace replied simply. As the FBI team prepared for the assault, Grace's phone rang. This time, it was an actual call instead of a text. Ms. Thompson? The voice was calm and professional. This is Grace Thompson. My name is irrelevant. What matters is that I have Vincent Drake and I know you're outside my building. Grace motioned for the FBI team to trace the call. What do you want? I want to make you an offer. Vincent Drake fired you because he thought your experience was worthless. He chose youth over wisdom, technology over human judgment. Now his life depends on that same experience he dismissed. Get to the point. Come inside alone and I'll let Vincent go. Refuse and he dies. Grace looked at Agent Martinez, who was frantically signaling for her not to agree, but 30 years of experience had taught her to read situations that others couldn't understand. Why would you make that trade? Grace asked. Because this was never about money or information. This was about proving a point. Vincent Drake learned that age and experience have value. You've proven that older doesn't mean obsolete. The lesson has been taught. Grace made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone without her background. I accept. Grace walked into the warehouse alone, carrying no weapons except her 3 decades of experience in dealing with dangerous situations. She found Vincent on the 3rd floor, tied to a chair but unharmed, with the professional standing nearby. Ms. Thompson, the professional said, thank you for coming. Release him. In a moment. First, I want Mr. Drake to understand something. The professional turned to Vincent. Mr. Drake, do you know why you're still alive? Vincent, who looked exhausted but alert, shook his head. You're alive because Grace Thompson is better at her job than Derek Chen. Not because she's younger, not because she has newer technology, but because she has something that can't be taught in schools or downloaded from the internet. Experience. The professional began cutting Vincent's restraints. Your new security system was impressive, but it was predictable. My team studied it for months and found ways to defeat every protocol Derek had implemented. But Grace Thompson's old system, the professional continued, we couldn't crack it. Too many human variables, too much institutional knowledge, too many judgment calls that couldn't be anticipated or programmed. Vincent rubbed his wrists as the zip ties were removed. You orchestrated this entire kidnapping just to prove that point? We orchestrated this kidnapping because your acquisition deals were worth millions to our organization. But when you fired the one person who could have stopped us, you made our job easy. The professional handed Grace a key card. Mr. Drake, Grace Thompson is worth 10 Derek Chens. Age doesn't make someone obsolete, it makes them experienced. Grace helped Vincent to his feet. We're leaving now. Of course, my team and I will be gone within 10 minutes. As Grace and Vincent walked toward the exit, Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Grace, I owe you an apology. You owe me more than an apology, Vincent. You owe me my job back. Vincent stopped walking. What? Grace turned to face him. Vincent, this kidnapping happened because you valued appearance over substance, youth over experience, technology over human judgment. If you've learned from this experience, prove it. You want your old job back? I want my job back, with the authority to rebuild the security department the right way. No more discrimination based on age, no more worship of technology for its own sake, and no more dismissing people because they don't fit your image of what a modern employee should look like. Vincent thought about everything that had happened. His kidnapping, Derek's system failures, Grace's successful rescue operation, and his own prejudices that had nearly cost him his life. Grace, he said finally, you've got a deal. 6 months later, Vincent stood before the board of directors of Drake Enterprises, presenting a quarterly report that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, Vincent began, I'm pleased to report that our new security operations, under the leadership of Grace Thompson, have achieved a 100% success rate in threat prevention and a 40% reduction in security costs. Board member Patricia Williams raised her hand. Vincent, didn't we invest heavily in high-tech security systems? Are we abandoning that technology? Grace, who was sitting at the conference table in her restored position as head of security, stood up to answer. Mrs. Williams, we're not abandoning technology. We're using it more intelligently. The key insight is that technology should support human judgment, not replace it. Can you elaborate on that? Certainly. Derek Chen, who is now our deputy security chief, has redesigned our digital systems to provide information rather than make decisions. Our human staff uses that information to make judgment calls based on experience, intuition, and pattern recognition that no computer can replicate. Vincent added, we've also implemented what Grace calls the Experience Initiative. We actively recruit security personnel with diverse backgrounds and experience levels, from recent graduates to seasoned professionals. Derek Chen, who had embraced his new role with enthusiasm, presented the technical aspects. Our hybrid approach combines the data processing power of artificial intelligence with the pattern recognition abilities of experienced humans. It's more effective than either approach alone. After the meeting, Vincent and Grace walked through the Drake Enterprises headquarters, which now looked very different than it had a year earlier. The security staff represented a wide range of ages and backgrounds, from recent criminal justice graduates to retired police officers and military veterans. Grace, Vincent said as they reached his office, I need to ask you something. What's that? Do you think I've really changed, or am I just grateful that you saved my life? Grace considered the question seriously. Vincent, gratitude is temporary. Change is permanent. The fact that you've restructured your entire hiring philosophy, given Derek a chance to learn from his mistakes, and created an age-diverse workplace tells me that you've learned something deeper than gratitude. What have I learned? You've learned that wisdom comes from experience, that experience comes from time, and that time means age. You can't have the benefits of experience without accepting that the people who have it are older than you. Vincent nodded. I also learned that my prejudices almost got me killed. More importantly, You learned that those prejudices were making your company weaker. Age discrimination isn't just morally wrong. It's strategically stupid. That evening, Vincent attended a retirement party for one of Grace's security guards, 67-year-old Frank Morrison, who had decided to step down after 40 years in law enforcement and corporate security. The gathering included employees from across the company, representing every age group and background. As Vincent watched Frank share stories of his decades in security work, he realized how much institutional knowledge and hard-earned wisdom he had been discarding in his pursuit of youth and innovation. "Frank," Vincent said when he had a chance to speak with the retiring guard, "thank you for your years of service. I'm sorry it took me so long to appreciate what you brought to this company." Frank smiled. "Mr. Drake, the best leaders are the ones who learn from their mistakes. You're going to do fine." Grace joined them, carrying a piece of cake. "Frank's been mentoring our new recruits. Did you know that his crime prevention insights have improved our threat assessment accuracy by 60%? Vincent shook his head. "Frank, why didn't I know about your contributions before?" Frank chuckled. "Because you weren't looking for them, sir. You were looking for different things." "What kind of things?" "Youth, energy, innovation, all good qualities. But you forgot to look for wisdom, experience, and judgment." Grace added, "Frank represents something that Derek's AI systems can't replicate. Decades of pattern recognition, hundreds of thousands of hours of observation, and the kind of intuitive understanding that only comes from time." As the party continued around them, Vincent reflected on how much his perspective had changed. A year ago, he would have seen Frank's retirement as an opportunity to replace an outdated employee with a younger, more energetic alternative. Now, he saw it as the loss of irreplaceable institutional knowledge. "Grace," Vincent said, "how do we make sure we don't lose Frank's expertise when he retires?" "We've already thought of that," Grace replied. "Frank is going to work part-time as a consultant, mentoring new security staff and helping us develop training programs based on his experience." "And Derek?" "Derek is eager to learn. He's realized that his technological skills are much more valuable when they're combined with human experience and judgment." Vincent looked around the room at the diverse group of employees, young and old, tech-savvy and street-smart, innovative and experienced. "Grace, I think this is what a really successful company looks like." "What do you mean?" "A place where everyone's contributions are valued, where experience is respected, where wisdom is sought after rather than dismissed." Grace smiled. "Vincent, I think you're finally understanding what real leadership looks like." 2 years after his kidnapping, Vincent Drake stood at the podium of the National Conference on Age Discrimination in the Workplace, preparing to deliver a keynote speech that would have been impossible for him to imagine before his experience with Grace Thompson. "2 years ago," Vincent began, "I was a CEO who believed that youth was always better than experience, that new was always better than proven, that innovation required dismissing everything that came before." Vincent looked out at the audience of business leaders, HR professionals, and civil rights advocates. "I was also a CEO who nearly died because of those beliefs." He continued, "When I fired Grace Thompson, my head of security, I thought I was modernizing my company. In reality, I was eliminating the one person whose experience and judgment could have prevented my kidnapping." Vincent's voice grew stronger as he continued. "Grace Thompson saved my life twice. First, she rescued me from my kidnappers using 30 years of law enforcement experience. Second, she saved me from my own prejudices by showing me that age discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's strategically stupid." The audience applauded, but Vincent wasn't finished. "Today, Drake Enterprises has the most effective security operation in our industry. We have the lowest turnover rate, the highest employee satisfaction scores, and the strongest financial performance in our company's history." Vincent stepped away from the podium and gestured to where Grace was sitting in the front row. "Grace Thompson, would you join me up here?" As Grace made her way to the stage, Vincent continued speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the woman who taught me that experience is not the enemy of innovation, it's the foundation of wisdom." Grace joined Vincent at the podium, and he handed her the microphone. "Grace, Tell them what you told me about the value of experience. Grace spoke with the clear, confident voice that Vincent had learned to respect and trust. Experience isn't about being old or young. It's about learning from challenges, developing judgment through practice, and understanding that wisdom comes from time. She turned to Vincent. Vincent didn't need to choose between innovation and experience. He needed to learn how to combine them. The strongest organizations are those that blend the energy of youth with the wisdom of age. Grace looked back at the audience. Age discrimination hurts everyone. It deprives companies of valuable experience. It wastes human potential, and it creates workplaces where people are valued for superficial characteristics rather than their contributions. The standing ovation lasted for several minutes, but Vincent barely heard it. He was thinking about how much his life had changed since Grace Thompson had walked into that warehouse to save him. After the conference, as Vincent and Grace flew back to New York, Grace asked him the question that had become their tradition. "So, Vincent, what did you learn today?" Vincent smiled, looking out at the clouds below. "I learned that 2 years ago I thought leadership meant being the smartest person in the room. But real leadership means recognizing that the smartest person in the room might be someone you never expected." "And what's the difference?" "The difference," Vincent said, "is that when you assume you're the smartest person in the room, you stop listening and learning. But when you recognize that wisdom can come from anywhere, including from someone you might have overlooked because of their age, you become a leader worth following." Grace nodded approvingly. "Now you're getting it." As their plane flew through the clear evening sky, Vincent reflected on how a single crisis had taught him the most important lesson of his business career. That in a world obsessed with youth and innovation, the people who understand the value of experience and wisdom will always have a competitive advantage. Sometimes the person who saves your life is someone you thought was too old to matter. But more often than not, the people we dismiss because of age, appearance, or circumstances are exactly the people who have the most to teach us about leadership, wisdom, and what it really means to serve others. What do you think? Have you ever experienced age discrimination in the workplace? Do you believe that experience is more valuable than youth in certain situations? Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.